We have a very, very special guest right now joining us from Jefferies India. Govindarajan Chillappa, MD and Head India Research is now joining us. Govind, firstly, it's a pleasure talking to you. And could you just tell us your view on the Indian markets post the demonetization? Is the strategy changing, or you're waiting for a lot of data to come in before you can work out on your numbers?
Okay, we've been cautious on the markets even prior to demonetization. We thought the valuations are quite expensive and earnings growth expectations are way too high. And that view only gets a little stronger post demonetization. Now, I don't think there is any point waiting for data, because the data that we'll get over the next few months are going to be very, very volatile. And they're not necessarily useful in analyzing what's going to happen in the medium term. As we speak, the businesses that are impacted more are the businesses that are transacted in cash. But that doesn't necessarily mean these are the businesses that have higher involvement of black money or hidden wealth. For example, soap sales are all on cash, and that business has gotten impacted because the wholesale channel is come to a standstill. But that's not going to have a lasting impact, right? By FY18, we think most of the staples demand will normalize. The impact will really be on high-end discretionary, some parts of the housing market, etc., where transaction is not necessarily fully on cash, even though there is a cash component, but the involvement of a lot of buyers who have hidden wealth, hidden income, would be the one that will start affecting their purchase decision and risk appetite next year. So FY18 seems a very, very challenging year as far as consumer discretionary is concerned. To a certain extent, the banking sector, credit growth would be lower. Overall activity levels in FY18, I think, will be lower than what we thought as of November 8th. So we stay cautious. We think the market has a reasonable downside left from here.
Right. And what would be your Nifty target? I think 7,500 is what was the target. Does that continue to stay?
That is right. Our target is 7,500. At 7,500, it will trade at a marginal premium to what it has historically traded at. But earnings expectations for that 7,500 is still reasonably high. Like, to put in perspective, the earnings growth we have seen from FY12 to FY16 has been in low single digits. The expectation for FY17 consensus is about 11 to 12, and consensus for FY18 is about 18-19%. Our expectations are about 8% for FY17 and about 13% for FY18. But I think there are downside risks even to those numbers. Even though we are more cautious than consensus, I think there are downside risks to those numbers as well. Just to put it in terms of a time frame, to expect FY18 earnings growth to be higher than what we have seen any time between FY12 and FY17, considering all the disruptions that we are seeing because of this anti-corruption move, as well as the added complication because of GST, still seems a little over-optimistic. So I would not be surprised if earnings growth in FY18 ends up being in single digits. So 7,500 based on the current expectations on long-term average, slightly over long-term average multiples, but I think there are downside risks to that as well.
Right. A lot of participants who have come, or strategists that we have spoken to, say that now Nifty is looking attractive. But do you think it's just looking attractive because EPS cuts are yet to come, and then suddenly you would start to see that Ps would start to look, fairly what they were before demonetization?
Well, flows are hard to predict, and there are just too many factors that are beyond our ability in terms of forecasting. I mean, it will depend on what happens to EM flows and India allocation within EM flows. So I'll stick to more fundamental views on this. From a technical factor, since you did ask, India is still overweight in most GEM portfolios. So we are not starting from an underweight position. The earnings expectation, as I mentioned, is also fairly high, and valuations are reasonably high on those elevated earnings expectations. So we don't have valuation or technical support to start with. For those who are arguing that the market has corrected and it's looking cheap, it depends on where you start your chart, right? If you start your chart from the peak of the market, it will always look as if the market has fallen a lot. You stretch the chart for 2 years, most of the stocks that have done well are still have done extraordinarily well even after the correction over a 2-year period. Right, you look at the list of the top 7-8 stocks that everybody likes, like some in the auto space, some in the banking space. They've all done extremely well over a 2-year period. So I don't think they have corrected meaningfully enough. And if you look at a price earnings chart, if you do a rolling price earnings chart, there's hardly been any correction. So I don't agree with this view that the market is corrected and suddenly looking attractive.
Right. In terms of what happens in the global market, that would be quite important. You talk to a lot of funds or your clients who not only look at India but look at the entire emerging market, look at the entire equities around the world. What is the view that, say, if US Fed were to hike and probably not give a dovish tone, or if ECB were to go ahead and give a timeline to their QE program that they have, what's the view that these FIIs or your clients have?
Right, from a fundamental perspective, the emerging view is that the U.S. economy is strengthening. There is likely to be fiscal reflation in the U.S. and growth in U.S. will accelerate. So, relatively, from a growth perspective, growth differential between the developed markets and emerging markets will probably narrow a bit. And from a flows perspective, we have seen the first round of big outflows from EMs, and India has been participant in that outflow. And as if Fed were to hike rates and ECB also gets into a mode of liquidity tightening, there will be a technical impact as well. On the other hand, the strengthening of commodity prices that we have seen in the recent past might help some of the emerging economies which have gotten butchered in the last 2-3 years because of the commodity rout. But how it benefits India over medium term will be through those economies doing better and our manufactured good exports starting to recover. But I don't think that's the story for the next 1-2 years. So the global environment isn't necessarily supportive either fundamentally or from a technical reason for the Indian markets right now.
Right. One of the important things to track EPS or strategy in India is what's the rates into, what's the current interest rate into a market, what's the rate at which the rupee is selling. What do you make of predictions that came in from RBI? Do you think they were slightly over-optimistic, or they are waiting for data to come in the next 2 or 3 quarters before they actually see before they can actually take a substantial call on the rate?
Well, I think several factors have weighed in the RBI stance. First, we've just had a rate cut 2 months ago, and I think it's way too early to take the next rate cut unless the inflation outlook changes drastically. Now, the RBI has put a framework in place. The MPC is supposed to follow the inflation as the primary target, and I don't think they can suddenly change the goalposts just because most of the market wants it. So they have stuck to their framework, and I think they have done the right thing. Secondly, the interest rate differential between India and, let's say, the US has narrowed quite drastically in the last 3-4 months. And if you actually take the hedging costs, I think the carry today would be neutral or probably negative. US rates plus the hedging cost would probably be more than the India's risk-free rate. So, that's not a sustainable situation. So we can't have much lower rates than now if the US rates keep going up. Thirdly, this is a very volatile environment, right? I mean, nobody seems to have a great hang of what demonetization does to inflation, what it does to growth. And for the RBI to make such a big policy change like a rate cut, when the data point, the underlying data points are themselves moving around so much, I don't think would have been the best thing to do. So I think the RBI has taken a view that they will wait for a better understanding of what demonetization does to growth and inflation. They'll also probably want to see what the government does. I mean, there is a widespread expectation that the government will reflate the economy. And if fiscal deficit does expand, or if the government decides not to stick to the fiscal deficit targets, that will be another input into the RBI's thinking. So, and then, of course, there is a US Fed meeting in between. So Feb, post the budget, would probably be a right time for the government, for the RBI to take a call on rates.
Right, but irrespective of that, you expect banks to go ahead and keep the rates slightly lower. We had a couple of economists yesterday. They said that it really doesn't matter how much RBI would cut because banks have already signaled that liquidity is high and rates are going to be low.
Yes, so that is the reflective of the current environment. I mean, which is the point I'm trying to make. This is an extraordinarily unusual situation where you have such a huge flow into the banks in terms of money coming back. And all of them have gone and bought G-Secs. So the rates have collapsed post demonetization. Now, let's say 3-4 months down the line, if currency in circulation normalizes and goes back to what it should be, right, 10, 11, 12 lakh crores, whatever the number might be, and the rates that we see then would be the right benchmark for the banks and the RBI to take a call. So what we are seeing right now is a very unusual and temporary situation.
Right. Let's talk about some sectors and stocks. So, in terms of auto, you've been looking at auto for really a long time. In such an environment, very difficult to take a call. What happens to the auto stocks or auto volumes?
Well, it is difficult, but we have to take a call. So, we have taken a call. See, I'll put it this way. The impact of the process that the government is following, and before that, I'll preface it by saying that this is not the end of anti-corruption move. I mean, it's not as if post-demonetization, the government would say, you know what, we have done what we could do on black money and we'll just stop now. I don't think that is politically possible. So you will see more and more action on the black economy and hidden wealth. Whether it's as drastic as demonetization or not is moot, but there will be more measures. This will change people's behavior, their willingness to buy, the risk appetite, etc. And this will impact the higher end discretionary more than it does staples, for example. So I do expect FY18 to be a fairly challenging year for the car industry. It will be slower than what you thought earlier. It'll probably be slower than what people are thinking right now. So FY18 does seem a challenging year for the four-wheeler industry. Two-wheelers will also be impacted, but not as much. As we speak, two-wheelers are impacted more because there is a lot of transaction in cash, but the wealth impact is a lot more in cars than it is in two-wheelers. So FY18 looks challenging for the entire auto space. The space is overowned. I would be neutral or I'll be underweight the space, but within that, two-wheelers look better positioned.
Right, and in terms of auto, in terms of at least the cars or the luxury cars, there was a movement towards premium cars, right? So at least that will stop, which means high margins may not come in for a lot of players.
Well, that's not necessarily the case because, when we talk about premiumization, we are talking about very narrow price points. We are talking about people who are buying 5 lakh rupee cars, buying 6 lakh rupee cars, right? We are not talking premiumization of people moving significantly across various segments, right? It's not as a small car buyers are suddenly buying luxury cars. So there is a marginal shift as far as price points are concerned. And that is also because the pie is not growing. I mean, if you look at the car industry, in the last 5 years, it's hardly grown. It's the same set of people or same set of addressable customers who are coming back. First-time buyers are largely absent. And replacement demand is what has driven whatever little growth we have seen in the last 5 years. And when that happens, typically you tend to see bigger and bigger cars, right? People usually upgrade when they replace a car. And also, most of the product innovations have happened in premium hatchbacks, in entry-level sedans, and in compact SUVs. And product innovations tend to activate that market. So I wouldn't necessarily draw this conclusion that suddenly we'll see people going back from Baleno back to a Swift. I don't think that is what I'm expecting. What I'm expecting is a gentle slowdown in overall growth rates. Certainly slow down more in the 15-20 lakh rupee cars than in 4 to 6 lakh rupee cars. But this trend of moving higher within the 4 to 6 lakh rupee price band, I don't think that changes.
Right. So, that was about car. Let's just take an example of something like a Titan. And again, I know that your compliance doesn't allow you to talk about stock. So we'll just take it as an example and not a view. Titan's call, in the conference call, they said that, they expect in FY18 to benefit out of demonetization. Why? Because a lot of unorganized players would find it very, very difficult to operate after this. So there will be a lot of sectors like this where unorganized gets killed, and probably good branded names with very good chain as Titan or probably a Havells has can do well?
Yes, so you're right. I can't talk about individual stocks, so I wouldn't do that. But let's expand this discussion into not just demonetization. Actually, it's anti-corruption and as well as GST. As it is FY18, we would have seen movement from unorganized to organized, informal to formal. And this would have happened across many sectors. Now, the question to ask is, where is unorganized competition for organized listed players? Right? There isn't any unorganized competition to car makers, for example. Most unorganized competition exists for participants in low-end consumption. That could be soaps, that could be footwear, that could be innerwear, it could be tiles, plywoods, etc. Or there is unorganized competition to trade channels. Right? The name that you mentioned is essentially a trade channel. Right? You could see shift from unorganized trade channels in several industries into organized trade channels. Similarly, you will see shift from unorganized manufacturers of soaps, tiles, plywoods, etc. into organized. That would have anyways happened with GST. This only hastens that process. You will see a much faster shift. Now, there will be certain industries where the overall growth rate shifts down, and therefore the shift from unorganized to organized might not necessarily change their FY18 number for the better. but the medium-term story certainly gets much stronger.
Right. So, you would be tracking any of these numbers, any of these management commentary, and where probably, one is seeing a market share shift. If it can last for a while, it could actually be a very big opportunity in the consumer durable pack.
Yes, in low-end consumption, certainly so. Consumer durable is a very generic word which covers a lot of spaces. Television makers, they don't have any unorganized competition, and it's counted as consumer durable. So we have to be careful about what we define as segments that benefit. It will certainly benefit manufacturers of low-end consumption items, be it in staples, be it in durables.
Right. Tactically, would you be positive on the technology pack? Now, firstly, they don't have any cash involvement, so it's purely a digital business. Majority of the revenue comes in from the global market, which of course have not seen demonetization. And plus, it's not done well for a while. So valuations are also not particularly that great. And, these companies like HCL, Wipro, probably Infosys, TCS, and the entire sector, disclosure norms are very high. They have been there for a while. People know the management. They know how this business operates. Tactically, would be a good time to be overweight on technology?
Yes, I would. We would be overweight consumer staples, we'd be overweight technology, and technology, they have their own challenges. And now, there are big question marks on regulatory changes in the US as well. So it's not as if they are without challenges, but a lot of these challenges have been well discussed and well probably factored into earnings expectations. So you have a combination of reasonably realistic expectations, reasonably low valuations relative to their own history, and reasonably low ownership as well. So, in the kind of context and environment that I expect, where markets will struggle, this is one sector to be in addition to staples that I mentioned.
Right. And in terms of technology, they would be attractive from a dividend-paying opportunity as well, or they still need further correction for any investor to just buy them for dividends?
Well, their ability to pay dividend is fairly high. Their intent is still not clear. So we don't know whether managements now recognize that growth opportunities in the future is a lot lesser than what they thought earlier, and therefore they can start distributing out the cash flows that they make. I think that's still moot. Some of these companies might choose to reinvest through acquisitions or whatever else. But the opportunity for IT companies to significantly increase their dividend payout is quite significant, because as it is not a capital intensive business, plus they throw up a lot of cash flows, and growth opportunities are shrinking. So I would expect dividend payouts to go up, but finally it's the management's call, and we still don't know whether they will take that call.
Right. In terms of pharma, that valuation comfort is not there, but again, it's a similar business which doesn't get much impacted by demonetization.
Well, we are fairly cautious on large cap pharma, and our view is that the regulatory issues are not being fully factored in. It's in terms of the extent of challenges, it's a lot more than what people think, and certainly a lot more than what it is for the IT industry. Secondly, you're right. Valuations are expensive. They're still much above what their historic trading average has been, and much above what the market is, and significantly higher than IT. So that's the reason, as a defensive, we prefer IT to pharma.
Right. Let's talk about the tough part now. When does the capex cycle pick up? With demonetization, do you think the capex cycle, which was expected to pick up, probably after 2-3 years of not that great capex, will get further delayed, at least from the private side?
Well, we have been expecting pickup in capex in the next 1 year for the last 5 years. So it's in that sense, the disappointment is not new. Clearly, capacity utilizations are still not at a level that will force companies to go start investing in capex. Secondly, now that the growth outlook is a little more muted than what it was earlier, that will also make people rethink their investment strategies. And third, the part that is very challenging to analyze is the wealth effect. Now, a lot of industrialists, promoters, etc., would have some kind of negative wealth effect based on what's going on right now. how it influences not just their purchases of cars and houses, also their investments in businesses. And we are not talking about the large listed companies. I'm also talking about the large set of SMEs which account for a significant portion of the economy as well as the GDP. How it influences their decision to invest more money in new businesses or expanding their businesses is moot. So in summary, I'd say FY18 private sector capex would be lower than what we would have expected on November 8th. On the public sector capex, while the growth numbers look high, it's easy to get excited about public sector capex. It's also likely that FY18 we might see some more investments in capex as the government tries to reflate the economy. They are not very large in context of the overall size of the economy. I mean, between central government and state government, the total capex to GDP is like less than 4%. Whereas the total capital formation in the overall economy is about 29%. So it's roughly 15% of the overall capex. So it'll make a big difference to certain sectors. It could make a big difference to roads, railways, or wherever else. But it's not going to make an overall difference to the economy in the short term. Of course, these have huge multiplier impact in the long term. But in the short term, they're not going to have a huge impact. And lastly, I'll also say that even assuming that the government says, we need to spend more in capex and, allocate more money to, let's say, the road ministry. It's not as if the road ministry is capable of increasing construction from 25 kilometers a day to suddenly increase it to 35 or 40. We don't have the institutional capacity to do that. So capex might accelerate on the public infrastructure side marginally, but the overall capex in FY18, I would think will be, similar or slightly lower than what we thought earlier.
In terms of demonetization, maybe if there is a windfall gain to RBI, probably the overall currency that comes into the banks may not be equal to what essentially RBI has issued. Do you think that gives government a fiscal space to spend more?
Well, this subject itself is too controversial. First of all, now it's not clear how much money will actually get extinguished, right? I mean, the pace with which deposits are coming, it's moot how much money actually gets extinguished. And second, there are also big questions, legal questions on whether the RBI can transfer it as a dividend. And I think the governor made it clear yesterday that that's not automatically the case. So I'm not sure if this should be a story any longer. Whether the government has fiscal space because of higher personal tax collection as a part of this process is something that we'll have to wait till the actual data comes out. But remember that in FY18, while you might have, let's assume that you have higher personal income tax collection, personal income tax is less than a third of the total tax collections, right? I mean, the challenge is really on indirect tax collection if there is a slowdown. There's a challenge on corporate tax collection if there is a slowdown. There is a challenge also on customs duty if there is a slowdown. I mean, there will be a slowdown in imports as well. So I'm not sure if on the balance tax collections will necessarily be better than what we thought earlier. So the fiscal question is a little moot right now, and I don't have a clear answer to that.
Right. And in terms of, the data that we get of advanced tax very soon, or probably corporate numbers going into Jan and Feb, they would definitely mean that corporate tax collection would be slower because November has been like, just a standstill for a lot of companies.
So is December. I mean, I think when December numbers come out for several industries that report monthly numbers, you'll see that December is also fairly challenging. November, see the supply chain cycles are long. So even if people started postponing purchase decisions, it's not as if the manufacturing came to a standstill immediately. So there will be a lag between consumers slowing down purchases to manufacturing actually slowing down. And the length of the supply chain will make sure that December is probably a better representation of the slowdown, the demonetization cash crunch impact than November is. So the December quarter is very challenging. Yes, you will see a big fall in corporate tax collections.
Right. So the fiscal space may be limited. But at the same time, with this move coming in, you could expect a lot of big bang announcements in the budget. With this move, probably move to, curb more black money, to probably ask people to go and, give more tax, give more disclosure norms. A lot could change.
Yes. So, I mean, the exact form and shape any such measure would take is hard to say. But I'll make 3 points. First, I think there will be continuous changes, tweaking of income tax laws, disclosures that need to be made, etc., to make sure that this is a continuous process and, over a period, the income tax compliance increases. Second, I do think that there will be some kind of permanent measures on cash withdrawals. Again, what measure the exact measure would be, I think is arguable.
Govind, the points that you highlighted earlier, what do you think would it mean for banks, or only digital payment companies, as statements have been coming from Paytm, some of the other ones about the increase in the transactions would only benefit?
Yeah. So before we go there, I was making 3 points. One on compliance for tax, and there will be more tweaking to income tax laws. And second, something on cash withdrawal. The third and very important point is, see, I think you will see a change in the tone of the budget. So far, this government has been focused on reducing subsidies, cutting leakages, etc. I think it's almost now a necessity that there is some kind of a SOP for people at the bottom of the pyramid. That could take shape of some wealth income transfer or SOPs for housing, etc., etc.
Right. And what would that mean for banks?
I think FY18 is a challenging year again. I think we are looking at lower credit growth than earlier, probably upside risk to NPLs. And all the value capture on this whole shift to e-wallets, etc., is being done by the unlisted space.